a bombshell in the COVID-19 pandemic, or at least the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. I know a lot of you guys are sick of talking about it and hearing about it, but here's why it is important to continue to bring light to these topics, because the frauds that were perpetuated against the American public and the world's public by everybody involved, from our government to our medical professionals, should I say the medical establishment, because a lot of actual doctors and MDs in private practice tried to sound the alarms on this, and a lot of them were threatened with the loss of their license, the loss of their ability to practice medicine if they did not go along with what the medical establishment was telling them about this pandemic. So it is important to continue to bring the light to this. Now, documents have linked the potential COVID patient zero to the U.S.-funded research lab in Wuhan, China. This is from our friends over at The Intercept. They do great reporting. I always love to do research so I can give you guys the best information possible here every Friday. One of the first Wuhan researchers sickened with COVID in the fall of 2019 was a man who worked at the Wuhan Institute of Virology named Ben Hu. Who? Ben Hu. That's who. Ben, that's who. He was getting financial support from the American government for risky gain-of-function research on coronaviruses, according to documents obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request by the transparency advocacy organization White Coat Waste Project. The funding came in 3 grants totaling $41 million, doled out by USAID and the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, or NIAID, the agency headed by who else? Dr. Anthony Fauci, who, as we've established on this show, is a criminal, who is listed as an investigator on these grants. Now, the news that the U.S. intelligence had learned that 3 Wuhan Institute of Virology lab workers had been hospitalized with COVID symptoms in November 2019, significantly before the outbreak at the city's seafood market, was first reported by the Wall Street Journal 2 years ago. But the revelation had curiously little impact on the broader debate on the origin of the pandemic, even as it validate, if confirmed, the claim that the pandemic originated at the Hunan seafood wholesale market when the viruses allegedly jumped from an animal to a human. No such animal has been identified. They told us it came from a bat. Show us the bat, everybody. Show us the bat. But new reporting by Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi, sourced to 3 government sources familiar with the State Department investigation, has identified that 3 lab workers as Ben Hu, should I say? That's who. Ben Hu. Ben, that's who. Sorry, that's my little joke. Yu Ping and Yan Zhu. So Ben Hu, Yan Ping, and Yan Zhu. 2 of the grants ran from 2014 through 2019. The third was cut off in 2020 by President Donald Trump after the outbreak in Wuhan. And he saw, look, obviously, I know a lot of you don't like Trump. I don't particularly care for the man either. But he was one of the people sounding the alarms that, guess what, this obviously came from something other than a wet market in China. So he cut off the funding. The NIAID and USAID grants list Ben Hu as an investigator in the projects being funded. Hu is a top deputy to Xi Jinping, known in the virology world as Batwoman, for her work extricating samples of viruses from bats in Chinese caves. The FOIA documents were first obtained by White Coat Waste in 2021, but given new relevance with the reporting of WHO's involvement. The Times of London, meanwhile, has also reported new details about activity in the Wuhan Institute of Virology in the run-up to the pandemic. Similarly sourced to 3 investigators with the U.S. State Department that includes allegations about Wuhan labs' collaboration with Chinese military scientists, buttressing what had once been dismissed as a fringe conspiracy theory that the virus was connected to bioweapons research. In the lead up to the pandemic, the Wuhan Institute frequently experimented on coronaviruses alongside the Academy of Military Medical Sciences, a research arm of the People's Liberation Army, the Times reported. In published papers, the military scientists are listed as working for the Beijing Institute of Microbiology and Epidemiology, which is the military academy's base. Now, much of the focus of the Times investigation is on a virus found in a mine where workers were sickened in 2012, leading to hospitalizations and deaths. Another key question probed by the State Department investigators relate to a project proposed to the Pentagon by Xi and 2 collaborators, Ralph Barrick of the University of North Carolina, and Peter Daszak from EcoHealth Alliance. We talked about him before whenever we talk about the origins of this virus and how it was funded by Dr. Fauci and the U.S. government. Peter Daszak of the EcoHealth Alliance is involved in that. The proposal submitted to the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, entailed inserting a furin cleavage site into a coronavirus. It was rejected, but speculation remains as to whether some of the research was conducted anyway. So, folks, these people shut down the world for almost 3 years. They lied about the origins of the virus. They knew right away that the origins of the virus were from this lab in Wuhan, China. They knew this. And they lied to us. And then they said, look, you guys all have to shut down all the schools. You have to shut down everything. You have to shut this down, shut that down, shut this down. They gave us all of these remedies for this pandemic that have ended up having disastrous results in a lot of instances. Because also just this week, we found out just how much poor kids especially have suffered by losing months or years of schooling. National test scores plummeted for 13-year-olds, according to new data that shows the single largest drop in math scores in 50 years. New data has showed that we've had the single largest drop in math scores in 50 years for 13-year-olds. Poor kids have suffered the most because those kids did not have private tutors. Those kids oftentimes during the pandemic had parents who were working. And so a lot of them were not having someone in their home making sure that they were learning, continue to develop during the pandemic. And so these kids lost years of development that they will never get back. Studies are also showing that teenage depression rates spiraled out of control during this pandemic. The amount of children who are suicidal and depressed has risen And as we talked about, me and the Rev have talked about multiple times, the pandemic has seen the most drug overdoses in history. The last 3 years, we've had the most overdoses, drug overdoses in history. Alcoholism, drug addiction, depression, anxiety, spiraling out of control because of this virus that these people created in a laboratory and then lied about the origins of it, so that then they could tell us that in order for us to deal with this pandemic, we had to take the drugs that they were all invested in. We covered that story here. How many members of Congress were invested in these drug companies? Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer, Moderna. And they told us, if you do not take these drugs, you will lose your job. People lost custody of their children because they lied. Now I'm going to remind you guys that Dr. Fauci was called out on his lies multiple times by Senator Rand Paul. Now, the corporate media obviously sided with Dr. Fauci, who the liberal media decided was a saint who cannot be questioned. But in light of what has been discovered and is now being widely reported all over the world, not just in this country, but across the world, the Times of London and other places, I think it's important to revisit the squab that Rand Paul and Dr. Fauci had in Congress, where Dr. Fauci lies to the world and says, oh no, gain of function, what are you talking about? Gain of function research, what is that? What is gain of function research? I have no idea. Let's see what's going on here. See if I can. Hold on a second. But anyway, we played that many a times here on this show, but it's important to understand that these people should not be able to get away with what they've gotten away with. They've gotten away with far too much. And again, how do we hold politicians accountable? We don't vote for them. We don't support them. We don't donate to them. There are candidates who are running against the status quo in the Democrat primaries. You got Robert F. Kennedy and Marianne Williamson who are running. I support third party. I'm voting for my man Cornel West. And so, I think it's important to make sure that these people do not get away in perpetuity with the things that they've done. All right, folks, it's time for my first break here on WLTH 1370 AM. This is my country. Please give me a call, 219-885-1371. That number again, 219-885-1371. We'll be right back after these.